Mother Bear saw a baby on thin ice. What she did put everyone in tears. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning sun cast diamond-like sparkles across Lake Evergreen, its frozen surface deceptively peaceful. Nestled between snow-dusted pines, the Taylor family cabin offered a perfect winter retreat, its chimney puffing gray smoke into the crisp air. Inside, Lily Taylor hummed softly while preparing breakfast, occasionally glancing at her 10-month-old daughter Emma, who played on a quilt spread across the wooden floor. "James, did you check the weather report?" Lily called to her husband, who was stoking the fire in the stone fireplace. The rangers at the entrance said a storm might be coming. James nodded, his breath visible in the still-cold cabin. "Should clear up by tomorrow. Perfect for ice fishing later today." Outside, beyond the awareness of the young family, a massive brown bear trudged through the snow with her yearling cub. The mother bear's thick fur rippled in the wind as she searched for the last berries clinging to bushes beneath the snow. Her cub playfully batted at icicles hanging from low branches, oblivious to the hunger that drove his mother's determined march toward the lake's edge. The Taylor cabin sat only 50 yards from the shoreline, where the ice stretched out like a fragile crystal floor. Rangers had posted warnings just days before about the unseasonably warm temperatures causing dangerous thinning in some areas. The bright red signs stood out against the white landscape, but were partially covered by fresh snow. Emma's curious eyes followed a chickadee that landed on the windowsill, its tiny body a blur of movement. While Lily turned to check on the pancakes and James stepped outside to gather more firewood, Emma crawled toward the door her father had left slightly ajar. The cold air tickled her nose, and the glittering expanse of the lake beyond beckoned like a magical playground. With remarkable determination for a baby who had only recently learned to walk, Emma pushed the door wider and toddled onto the porch. Her thick snowsuit and booties protected her from the cold, but did nothing to curb her newfound independence. Giggling, she descended the 3 wooden steps with careful concentration, her mittened hands steadying herself against the railing. The snow crunched beneath her tiny boots as she waddled toward the shoreline, drawn by the sparkling surface that promised adventure. Behind her, the cabin door swung further open in a gust of wind, erasing any evidence of her escape. At the lake's edge, a group of weekend visitors had gathered to take photos, their colorful winter jackets bright against the monochrome landscape. Their laughter and animated conversation carried across the still morning air as they posed for pictures, none noticing the small figure in the pink snowsuit approaching the ice from a different direction. "This will be perfect for Instagram," a woman called out, positioning her friends for another shot, their backs to the lake and the wandering child. The mother bear froze suddenly, her sensitive nose catching an unfamiliar scent. She raised her head, ears swiveling to locate the source of her unease. Her cub bumped against her hind legs, confused by the sudden halt. The bear's dark eyes narrowed as she spotted movement on the lake, something small and pink tottering onto the ice. Emma had reached the edge of the lake and, finding no barriers to her exploration, stepped onto the frozen surface. Her first steps were tentative, but delight quickly replaced caution as she discovered the smooth, slippery texture beneath her boots. She took another step and another, moving further from shore with each passing second. The sound of cracking was almost imperceptible at first, tiny splits in the ice radiating outward from the baby's weight. Emma, oblivious to the danger, continued her adventure, now nearly 20 feet from safety. The mother bear watched, her ancient instincts registering what the humans had failed to notice: the distinctive pattern of weak ice, the subtle shifts in color where the surface thinned dangerously, and the vulnerable young one heading straight for it. Inside the cabin, Lily turned with a plate of pancakes. "Emma, breakfast is—" Her words died in her throat as she scanned the empty room. The open door sent a spike of panic through her chest. "James!" she screamed, dropping the plate with a crash. "Emma's gone." On the ice, the baby's laughter rang out, pure and innocent, as the surface beneath her began to groan. James burst through the door, his face pale with fear. "What do you mean she's gone?" His eyes landed on the open door, and understanding crashed over him like an icy wave. Oh God, no! Together they raced outside, calling Emma's name, their voices sharp with panic. James spotted the tiny footprints in the snow leading toward the lake, and his heart nearly stopped. "Lily, she's heading for the ice." At the shoreline, the group of tourists continued their photo shoot, oblivious to the unfolding crisis. A young man named Connor Adams, a wildlife photographer who had been capturing images of winter birds nearby, lowered his camera as movement on the lake caught his attention. He squinted against the glare, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Hey!" he shouted to the group. "There's a baby out there on the ice." The tourists turned, gasps rippling through them as they spotted the small pink figure now alarmingly far from shore. One woman screamed, drawing the attention of others scattered around the lake's edge. Emma, startled by the sudden noise, wobbled and sat down hard on the ice. The impact sent a spiderweb of cracks racing outward from her position. The ice beneath her shifted slightly, causing her to whimper in confusion, her earlier delight transforming into fear. James and Lily reached the shore, their breath coming in desperate gasps. "Emma!" Lily screamed, lunging toward the ice. James caught her arm, holding her back. "The ice won't hold us both," he said, voice shaking. "I'll go. You call for help." Before either could move, Connor stepped forward. "Wait! Look there!" He pointed toward the tree line where the mother bear stood, her massive form now fully visible as she assessed the situation. "A bear," someone whispered, and panic spread through the gathering crowd. A man reached for his cell phone to call emergency services, while others backed away, torn between the threat of the predator and concern for the stranded child. The mother bear's cub whined anxiously, sensing his mother's tension. With a gentle nudge, she pushed him toward a hollow beneath a pine tree where he would be safe. The cub resisted at first, but a firm growl sent him scurrying to the shelter. "Get back!" James shouted as the bear moved closer to the shore. "It's going after my daughter." Connor grabbed James's arm. "No, wait. Look at how she's moving. She's being careful." The mother bear approached the edge of the lake with surprising delicacy, each paw placement deliberate as she tested the strength of the ice. Her powerful muscles tensed and relaxed with each step, redistributing her weight to prevent breaking through. Unlike the humans who were frozen in indecision, she moved with purpose. Dark eyes never leaving the pink bundle now crying softly on the cracking surface. "My God," Connor breathed, raising his camera instinctively. "I've studied bears for years, and I've never seen anything like this." On the far side of the lake, another drama was unfolding. Michael Hayes, a seasoned park ranger, had been alerted by a morning hiker about a bear sighting near the cabins. Armed with a tranquilizer gun, he had been tracking the animal's prints when he heard the commotion. Through his binoculars, he took in the impossible scene: a stranded baby, panicked parents, and a full-grown brown bear approaching the child on the ice. His training screamed at him to neutralize the threat, but something about the bear's behavior made him hesitate. Years of wildlife management had taught him that animals rarely behaved predictably, but what he was witnessing defied all logic. "This is Ranger Hayes." He spoke urgently into his radio. "We have a child stranded on thin ice at the north end of Lake Evergreen with a bear approaching. I need backup and emergency services immediately." He didn't mention his decision to hold fire, a choice that could cost him his job if things went wrong. The ice continued to crack beneath Emma, the sound like gunshots in the frozen air. She began to cry harder, her small body shivering from both cold and fear. Her pink mittens pressed against the ice as she tried to stand again, only to slip and cause more fractures to race outward. 20 feet away, the mother bear paused, reading the ice with senses humans couldn't comprehend. She lowered her massive head, seeming to test the air just above the surface, perhaps feeling the subtle changes in temperature that revealed the ice's thickness. Then, with renewed determination, she altered her course, taking a slightly longer route that would avoid the weakest sections. Lily clutched James's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white. "What's it doing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," James replied, equally quiet, as if speaking normally might shatter the strange tableau before them. Connor continued to document the scene, his photographer's instincts overriding his fear. "She's mapping a safe path," he said in disbelief. "Bears can detect subtle differences in ice thickness through changes in air temperature and echoing sounds. She's finding the strongest route to your daughter, or the easiest way to reach her prey," James countered, his face ashen. The gathering crowd had grown silent, collective breath held, as the massive predator steadily advanced across the ice toward the helpless child. Some backed away further, unable to watch what they feared would happen next. Others, like Connor, remained transfixed by the unfolding mystery. Ranger Hayes had reached the shoreline, tranquilizer gun ready but not raised. "Everyone stay back," he ordered, his authoritative voice cutting through the tension. Any sudden movements could startle the bear or further destabilize the ice. The mother bear was now just 10 feet from Emma, who had stopped crying and was watching the approaching animal with curious eyes. Perhaps too young to understand the danger, she reached one mittened hand toward the bear's approaching form, a gesture of innocent trust that drew gasps from the onlookers. "Please, God," Lily whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks, "please protect my baby." What happened next would be recounted in whispers of disbelief for years to come. The mother bear slowed her approach, lowering her body to distribute her weight more evenly across the fragile surface. She extended her neck, nostrils flaring as she took in the baby's scent. Emma giggled, the sound incongruously bright in the tense silence. Then, with exquisite gentleness that seemed impossible from such a massive creature, the bear extended her muzzle toward Emma's outstretched hand. But before contact could be made, a sharp crack split the air. A section of ice beneath Emma's leg suddenly gave way, plunging her tiny boots into the frigid water below. Emma's startled cry pierced the morning stillness as she scrambled to hold on to the remaining ice, her mittens slipping on the slick surface. The partial breakthrough hadn't fully immersed her, but water was quickly seeping into her snowsuit, and the surrounding ice continued to fracture unpredictably. "No!" James shouted, starting forward despite the danger. Connor and another man held him back. "You'll break through and both drown," Connor insisted. "The bear is closer. She might still—" His words cut off as they all witnessed what came next. The mother bear reacted with astonishing speed. Instead of retreating from the breaking ice, she surged forward, her massive front paw shooting out to push Emma away from the widening hole. The force slid the baby several feet across the ice toward a thicker section, even as the bear's own weight caused the compromised area to crack further. For a terrifying moment, it seemed the bear herself would plunge through, her front legs breaking through the surface as she struggled to distribute her weight. but with powerful movements she hauled herself onto more solid ice, water streaming from her fur. Emma, though pushed to safety, began to wail loudly, the combination of cold water, fear, and rough handling finally overwhelming her. She lay on her stomach on the ice, far enough from the broken section to be momentarily safe, but still stranded and increasingly wet and cold. The mother bear shook herself, sending droplets of lake water arcing through the air, then once again approached the baby. This time, her movements held a new urgency, as if she understood that the child's wet clothes posed a deadly threat in the freezing temperatures. On shore, Ranger Hayes had been joined by 2 colleagues who had arrived in response to his call. One raised his own tranquilizer gun, but Hayes pushed the barrel down. "Wait," he commanded. "She just saved that child from drowning. Let's see what she does." The mother bear had reached Emma again and was now doing something even more unexpected. She was using her massive body to shield the baby from the wind while gently nudging her with her muzzle, rolling her slightly to keep her moving across the ice toward shore. Connor's camera clicked rapidly, documenting each incredible moment. "She's herding the baby toward safety," he narrated in quiet amazement, using the same technique she would use with her own cub. "But why?" someone in the crowd asked. "Why would she risk herself for a human child?" No one had an answer as they watched the bear continue her gentle guidance, pushing Emma a few inches at a time across the treacherous surface. The baby had stopped crying, perhaps soothed by the rhythmic movement or simply too cold now for tears. Lily stood at the edge of the ice, arms outstretched, waiting and praying as the strange pair inched closer to safety. James paced beside her, torn between rushing out to his daughter and trusting this inexplicable rescue to continue. From the tree line, the bear's cub watched, occasionally whimpering but staying put as his mother had indicated. His small form shifted anxiously from paw to paw, dark eyes fixed on his mother's progress. "The ice is getting thicker as they near the shore," Connor observed, his voice tight with hope. They might actually make it. Emma was now just 15 feet from shore, with the mother bear still carefully nudging her along. The child's movements had grown sluggish, her exposure to the cold water and air taking its toll despite the relative protection of her snowsuit. Then, just as hope began to rise among the onlookers, a new sound echoed across the lake, the distant but approaching thrum of helicopter blades. Emergency services, responding to multiple 911 calls, had dispatched air support. The mother bear froze, her head raised toward the threatening noise. Every wild instinct urged her to flee from the approaching human machine, to return to her cub and the safety of the forest. Her muscles tensed visibly beneath her wet fur. "No, no, no," Ranger Hayes muttered, recognizing the danger. He grabbed his radio again. "Tell that chopper to back off. The noise will spook the bear." But his warning came too late. The helicopter crested the tree line, its downdraft creating ripples across the ice surrounding Emma and the bear. The pilot, seeing the massive predator so close to a child, misunderstood the situation entirely. The bear took a step back, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. For a heart-stopping moment it seemed she would abandon Emma and flee, leaving the weakened child still stranded on the ice. Instead, the mother bear made one final, decisive move. With a swift but gentle motion, she used her teeth to grasp the thick fabric of Emma's snowsuit collar, lifting the baby completely off the ice. With the child dangling from her jaws like a cub, the bear began a careful but faster retreat toward shore, her powerful legs finding the strongest path through pure instinct. Gasps and cries erupted from the shore as the bear lifted Emma. Ranger Hayes held up his hand to stop his colleagues from firing their tranquilizers. "Hold fire. She's carrying the child to safety." The bear's progress was steady and determined, each step bringing Emma closer to her parents. The baby hung limply now, either from trust or exhaustion, her pink snowsuit a stark contrast against the bear's dark fur. When they were just 5 feet from shore, the mother bear paused. For a long moment she stood absolutely still, her intelligent eyes surveying the humans waiting at the edge of the ice. The helicopter hovered overhead, its crew now aware of the unusual rescue unfolding below. Lily took a tentative step onto the ice, her hand extended. "Please," she whispered, though she knew the bear couldn't understand her words. "Please, give me my baby." The mother bear seemed to hesitate, as if weighing some unfathomable decision. Then, with deliberate care, she lowered Emma to the ice and used her muzzle to push the child the final few feet toward her mother's waiting arms. Lily rushed forward, scooping Emma into a desperate embrace. "She's so cold," she sobbed, clutching her daughter close. James enveloped them both in his arms, tears streaming freely down his face. The mother bear backed away slowly, never turning her back on the humans. When she reached the shoreline several yards away from the crowd, she paused again. Her gaze seemed to linger on the reunited family before she turned and lumbered toward the tree line where her anxious cub waited. The gathered crowd stood in stunned silence, many wiping tears from their eyes at what they had just witnessed. Connor lowered his camera, his hands shaking with emotion, and the realization that he had documented something extraordinary. Ranger Hayes approached the Taylor family, removing his heavy jacket to wrap around the shivering Emma. "Get her to the medical team," he instructed, pointing to the ambulance that had arrived at the parking area. "She needs immediate attention for hypothermia." As James carried his daughter toward help, Lily turned to look back at the forest's edge. The mother bear stood watching them, her cub now at her side. For a brief moment, across species and understanding, two mothers' eyes met in an unspoken acknowledgement of what had transpired. Then the bear turned, nudging her cub deeper into the protection of the forest, disappearing among the shadows of the pines. "Why?" Lily asked Ranger Hayes, her voice barely audible. "Why would she save my baby?" The ranger shook his head, still processing what he had witnessed. "In 30 years, working with wildlife, I've never seen anything like this. Bears are intelligent, complex creatures, but this—" He trailed off, searching for words. Connor stepped forward, his camera clutched tightly in his hands. "Some mysteries defy explanation," he said quietly, "but I have a theory." He nodded toward where the bear had vanished. 3 years ago, there was a female bear in this area who became famous locally because she had lost a cub to drowning in this very lake during spring thaw. Some biologists believe bears can remember specific places associated with trauma for their entire lives. "You think it was the same bear?" Ranger Hayes asked skeptically. "I don't know," Connor admitted, "but whatever her reasons, she recognized a baby in danger on thin ice, and she chose to help." The story of the mother bear who rescued baby Emma Taylor from the frozen lake spread quickly, first through local news outlets, and then, with Connor's remarkable photographs as evidence, across national and international media. Debates raged among wildlife experts, some dismissing the event as a bizarre anomaly or misinterpreted behavior, others suggesting it revealed complex cognition and empathy previously undocumented in wild bears. For the Taylor family, explanations mattered less than gratitude. Emma recovered fully from her ordeal, too young to remember it except through the stories told and retold as she grew. The Parks Department installed new, more visible warning signs around the lake, and regulations about supervising children near the water were strictly enforced. Ranger Hayes faced an inquiry about his decision not to tranquilize the bear but Connor's photographic evidence vindicated him. The images clearly showed the bear's gentle handling of the child, a sequence so remarkable that even the most skeptical reviewer could not deny what had occurred. As for the mother bear and her cub, they were given a wide berth by rangers in the following weeks. Trail cameras occasionally captured them fishing in streams or foraging for early spring vegetation, ordinary bear behaviors that gave no hint of the extraordinary event they had been part of. 2 weeks after the rescue, Lily Taylor returned to the lake's edge alone. She carried a small basket containing fresh berries, honey, and other treats that research suggested bears might enjoy. It was a token gesture, perhaps naive, but driven by a need to acknowledge the debt that could never truly be repaid. She placed the basket at the forest's edge and stepped back, not expecting any response but feeling the ritual important nonetheless. As dusk fell and Lily turned to leave, movement in the trees caught her attention. The mother bear emerged briefly into a patch of fading sunlight, her cub trailing behind her. They paused, the bear's nose raised to catch Lily's scent on the wind. For a heartbeat that seemed to stretch into eternity, their gazes met once more across the clearing. The bear made no move toward the offering, but neither did she retreat immediately. She simply stood, a wild creature existing in her own understanding of the world, yet somehow connected to the human woman by an inexplicable moment of grace. Then, as quietly as she had appeared, the mother bear turned and vanished into the gathering darkness, leaving Lily with a sense of wonder that would remain with her for the rest of her life. Later that night, when she checked the spot, the basket was gone. In the years that followed, visitors to Lake Evergreen would sometimes share stories of the unusually gentle bear, who seemed to watch over children playing near the water's edge, never approaching but always vigilant. Wildlife officials neither confirmed nor denied these accounts, but they noted that no bear attacks had been reported in the area for over a decade. And Connor Adams's photographs, which won him international acclaim and numerous awards, hung in natural history museums around the world, bearing the simple caption, "Compassion Beyond Understanding. Mother Bear rescues human child, Lake Evergreen, winter 2023. Perhaps most meaningful of all, the Taylor family established a wildlife preservation fund specifically focused on protecting bear habitats in the region. Its logo, designed by Lily herself, showed the silhouette of a bear and a small child, connected by a single, unbroken line. A reminder that sometimes, in the most unexpected moments, the boundaries between species fall away to reveal something profound about life itself. 6 years passed after that fateful winter day at Lake Evergreen. Emma Taylor had grown into a bright, energetic 6-year-old with no conscious memory of her rescue, though the story had become such a cornerstone of family lore that she sometimes felt as if she could remember the gentle pressure of the bear's muzzle guiding her across the ice. The Taylor family had moved permanently to a house near the lake, drawn by some inexplicable connection to the place that had nearly claimed their daughter but had also shown them a miracle. James had left his corporate job in the city to work alongside Ranger Hayes, who had become a close friend after the incident. Lily managed the Wildlife Preservation Fund, which had grown substantially thanks to Connor's photographs and the story that continued to captivate people around the world. Emma attended the local elementary school, where her classmates regarded her with a mixture of awe and curiosity as the Bear Girl. She had grown comfortable with the attention, fielding questions with the practiced ease of someone who had been telling the same story her entire life. "Did it hurt when the bear carried you?" a new student asked during recess one spring day. Emma shook her head, her blonde braids swinging. "I don't remember it, but Mom says the bear was super gentle, like how she'd carry her own baby." What Emma didn't tell her classmates was about the dreams. Vivid, recurring visions of being carried through a snowy forest by a massive, warm presence that made her feel completely safe. She had mentioned them to her parents once, and had seen the strange look they exchanged, a mixture of wonder and concern that prompted her to keep future dreams to herself. That summer, as the anniversary of the founding of the Taylor Wildlife Fund approached, Lily organized a community celebration at Lake Evergreen. The event would feature educational booths about local wildlife, guided nature walks, and the unveiling of a modest bronze statue commemorating the rescue. Connor Adams, whose career had soared following the publication of his photographs, was returning to give a presentation about bear behavior and conservation. The week before the celebration, James came home from his ranger duties looking troubled. He waited until Emma had gone to bed before sharing the news with Lily. "There's been a report of poachers in the north section," he said quietly, his hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Hayes found snare traps and bait stations yesterday." Lily's face paled. "Bears?" James nodded grimly. "Their pelts fetch a high price on the black market, and some of the traditional medicine dealers will pay thousands for certain parts." He couldn't bring himself to be more specific. "Have you identified which bears are being targeted?" "Not specifically, but—" James hesitated. "The activity is concentrated in the area where our bear has been spotted most frequently." They had taken to calling her our bear, though in truth, the mother bear who had saved Emma had never been tagged or officially tracked. Rangers occasionally reported sightings of a female bear with distinctive markings matching Connor's photographs, sometimes alone, sometimes with younger cubs from subsequent seasons. "We have to stop them," Lily said, her voice hard with determination. "We're trying. Hayes has authorized increased patrols, and we've removed the traps we've found. But these guys are professionals, Lily. They know how to hide their tracks." The conversation was interrupted by a small voice from the hallway. "Is something wrong with the bears?" Emma stood in her pajamas, a stuffed bear clutched in one arm, a gift from Connor on her 5th birthday, modeled after the bear that had saved her. James and Lily exchanged a glance. They had always been honest with Emma about her story, believing that the truth, however extraordinary, was important for her to understand. "Some bad people are trying to hurt the bears in the forest," James explained gently, patting the sofa beside him. Emma climbed up and leaned against his side. "But we're working very hard to protect them." "Is it my bear?" Emma asked, her voice small. "The one that saved me?" "We don't know for sure," Lily said, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But all the bears are important, and we're going to make sure they're safe." Emma nodded solemnly, then said something that sent a chill through both parents. "I had a dream about her last night. She was scared." James and Lily shared another look over their daughter's head, neither knowing how to respond to the eerie statement. "Well, we'll make sure she's protected," James finally said, trying to sound reassuring. "Now, back to bed, sweetheart. It's late." After Emma had returned to her room, Lily turned to James. "Do you think it's possible that she could somehow sense—" James shook his head. "It's just a coincidence. She heard us talking about bears today because of the celebration planning, and it influenced her dream." But later that night, as Emma slept fitfully, mumbling about danger and forest, neither parent felt entirely convinced by this rational explanation. The day of the celebration dawned clear and warm, the lake's surface rippling gently in the summer breeze, a far cry from the treacherous ice that had nearly claimed Emma's life years before. Colorful tents dotted the shoreline, and families streamed into the park, drawn by the promise of free wildlife education and the chance to hear firsthand the story that had captured hearts worldwide. Connor Adams arrived early, setting up a display of his photographs, including several new images of the bear they believed to be Emma's rescuer. taken over the years since the incident. He greeted the Taylors warmly, kneeling to Emma's height. "You probably don't remember me," he began, but Emma interrupted with a smile. "You're the man who took the pictures of my bear. Mom shows me all the time." Connor laughed. "That's right, and look how you've grown." He presented her with a special gift, a framed print of his most recent photograph of the mother bear, taken just 2 months earlier. In it, the bear stood at the forest's edge, looking directly at the camera with what seemed like intelligent awareness. "She's beautiful," Emma whispered, tracing the glass with one finger. Connor nodded, then lowered his voice. "I heard about the poachers. I'm going out with Hayes tomorrow to help locate their camp. Be careful," Lily warned. "James says they're dangerous." "I know, but I can't stand by while—" He broke off as a park official approached to inform him it was time for his presentation. The celebration proceeded smoothly, with visitors moving between exhibits on forest ecology, wildlife tracking, and conservation efforts. The bronze statue, a simple but moving depiction of a bear guiding a small child, was unveiled to applause, and more than a few tears from those who remembered the actual event. As evening approached, families gathered for a community picnic on the grass above the shoreline. Emma sat with a group of children, all eating hot dogs and listening wide-eyed as she recounted her story for perhaps the 100th time, embellishing slightly with each telling. James, who had been called away briefly for ranger business, returned to the picnic with a troubled expression. He pulled Lily and Connor aside, speaking in hushed tones. "Hayes found fresh blood near one of the poachers' camps," he reported grimly, "and fur samples that match our bear's coloration." Connor swore under his breath. "Is she—" "We don't know," James said. "But they're definitely tracking a specific bear, and the evidence suggests they wounded her." Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh God, no. I'm heading out with the search team at dawn," James continued. "If she's injured, we need to find her before the poachers do." None of them noticed Emma slipping away from the other children, moving closer to overhear the adults' conversation. Her small face grew serious as she processed her father's words. Without drawing attention to herself, she drifted back to the picnic, but her appetite was gone. That night, Emma's dreams were more vivid than ever before. She saw the forest through different eyes, feeling the burn of a wound in her shoulder, the desperate need to protect something precious. She woke, gasping, just before midnight, tears streaming down her face. Without turning on any lights, she dressed quickly in jeans and a sweatshirt, pulling on her sneakers and the jacket that hung by her bedroom door. From her dresser, she took the compass her father had given her for hiking, and from the kitchen she silently collected an apple and a package of cookies. The note she left on her pillow was simple: "Gone to help my bear. Don't worry." The Taylor house sat just a quarter-mile from the lake's edge, with the forest beginning immediately beyond their backyard. Emma had explored its fringes countless times with her parents, learning the names of plants and animals, developing a comfort with the natural world that belied her young age. But she had never ventured deep into the woods alone, and certainly never at night. Yet something pulled her forward, a certainty that transcended fear, a connection she couldn't explain but trusted completely. The three-quarter moon provided just enough light to follow the deer trail that led north, in the direction her father had gestured when discussing the poachers' camp. Miles away, in a crude campsite hidden deep in the forest, 3 men sat around a small fire, passing a bottle between them. Nearby, metal traps and high-powered rifles leaned against tree trunks, alongside a bloody backpack containing their grisly trophies from earlier hunts. "Oh, that bear's worth 10 grand easy," the oldest man said, his face weathered from years in the wilderness, especially with the story behind her, Some collector in Hong Kong will pay double once they hear it's the famous hero bear. If we can find her again, his companion muttered. That shot should have dropped her, but she still ran. Bears are tough, the third man commented, taking a swig from the bottle. But she's bleeding bad. We'll pick up the trail at first light. None of them noticed the small figure watching from behind a fallen log, her heart pounding with fear and anger as she overheard their plans. Emma had been walking for almost an hour, following an intuition she couldn't explain when she had spotted the glow of their fire. Curiosity had drawn her closer, but the men's words froze her in place. They were going to kill her bear, the creature that had saved her life, that appeared in her dreams, that somehow seemed connected to her in ways she couldn't understand but felt deeply. Panic rose in her throat, threatening to reveal her presence with a sob or gasp, but she forced herself to remain silent as she backed away from the campsite. Once she was far enough away to feel safe, Emma leaned against a tree, trying to think. She was lost. That much was obvious. The return journey would be impossible in the dark, and she had no way to alert her parents or the rangers about what she had discovered. A soft sound from the underbrush nearby made her jump. Instinctively, she pressed herself against the tree trunk, trying to make herself as small as possible. The sound came again, a low whine, like an animal in pain. "Hello," Emma whispered, immediately regretting making noise. What if the poachers heard her? There was no response except another whine, slightly louder this time. Something compelled Emma to investigate, drawing her toward a dense thicket of bushes just visible in the moonlight. As she approached, she heard labored breathing and caught the distinctive musky odor of a large animal. Pushing aside branches, Emma found herself face to face with her bear. The massive creature lay on her side in a small clearing, her breath coming in shallow pants. Even in the dim light, Emma could see the dark stain of blood on the bear's shoulder, where a bullet had torn through muscle and tissue. Beside the bear, two small cubs huddled fearfully, too young to leave their mother but old enough to sense her distress. Instead of fear, Emma felt a surge of protective determination. She approached slowly, murmuring soft reassurances, as she had seen her father do when treating injured wildlife. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here to help you. You saved me, remember? Now I'm going to save you." The bear's eyes, intelligent, pain-filled eyes, tracked her movements, but the animal made no aggressive motion as Emma knelt beside her massive head. Behind her, the cubs whimpered, but seemed to take their cue from their mother's calm acceptance of the human child. Emma gently placed her small hand on the bear's muzzle, feeling the warm breath against her skin. "I won't let them hurt you," she promised, her voice stronger now. "But we have to hide. Can you move?" As if understanding the question, the bear struggled to rise, managing to get her front legs underneath her before collapsing again with a grunt of pain. The bullet had done too much damage. She couldn't travel far in her condition. Emma bit her lip, trying to think like her father would in this situation. The poachers would follow the blood trail at dawn, which would lead them straight to this spot. She needed to get help before then, but leaving meant the bear and her cubs would be defenseless. A twig snapped nearby, and Emma froze. Had the poachers heard the bear's pained noises? Were they already searching? But the figure that emerged into the clearing was not one of the cruel-faced men from the campfire. It was Connor Adams, camera slung around his neck, face etched with concern that deepened to shock when he spotted Emma kneeling beside the wounded bear. "Emma," he whispered incredulously. "What on earth?" "She's hurt," Emma interrupted, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "The bad men shot her. They're going to kill her in the morning." Connor approached cautiously, his trained eye assessing both the bear's condition and the surreal scene of a 6-year-old girl keeping vigil beside the wounded predator. The cubs growled softly at his approach but made no move to attack. "Your parents are frantic," he told Emma, as he knelt beside her, maintaining a respectful distance from the injured bear. "Half the ranger station is out looking for you." "I had to come," Emma said simply. "I knew she needed me." Connor didn't waste time questioning how Emma had known or how she had found the bear in the vast forest at night. Instead, he pulled out his satellite phone, standard equipment for his wilderness photography expeditions, and quickly called James. "I found her," he said when James answered. "She's about 3 miles north of your house, and she's with your bear." He paused, listening to James's frantic questions. "Yes, Emma is fine, but the bear's been shot. Poachers." Another pause. "And James? She has cubs, 2 of them." After ending the call, Connor turned to Emma. "Your dad is bringing help. They were already out searching for you, and Hayes is bringing a wildlife veterinarian who can treat the bear." "Will she be okay?" Emma's voice was small. Connor studied the bear's wound, careful not to get too close. "I think so. The bullet seems to have gone through clean, but she's lost blood. Bears are incredibly resilient, though." "The poachers are nearby," Emma warned him. "I heard them talking about killing her in the morning." Connor's expression hardened. "Hayes will handle them. Poaching carries heavy penalties, especially for endangered species." He reached into his pack and pulled out a first aid kit. "In the meantime, let's see if we can help stop the bleeding." For the next hour, under Connor's gentle guidance, Emma helped clean and bandage the bear's wound as best they could. The massive animal remained surprisingly docile throughout the process, occasionally turning to check on her cubs, but otherwise allowing the humans to tend to her injury. "I've never seen anything like this," Connor murmured, shaking his head in wonder. "Wild bears don't usually allow human contact, even when injured. They typically become more aggressive." "She knows me," Emma said with the absolute certainty of childhood, "and she knows we're trying to help." As dawn approached, bringing with it the promise of both rescue and danger, Emma sat with her back against the bear's uninjured side, the cubs now cautiously investigating her shoelaces. Connor kept watch at the edge of the clearing, listening for the approach of either James's rescue party or the poachers. The sound of voices reached them first, hushed, cruel tones, discussing blood trails and tracking dogs. Connor motioned for Emma to stay silent as he melted into the underbrush, camera replaced by the heavy walking stick he carried for wilderness hikes. Minutes later, Emma heard a shout, followed by the sounds of a struggle. The bear tensed beside her, a rumbling growl vibrating through her massive body. Emma placed a reassuring hand on her fur. "It's okay," she whispered. "Connor will protect us." More voices joined the commotion, deeper, authoritative tones that Emma recognized with relief as belonging to her father and Ranger Hayes. The sounds of the confrontation faded, replaced by the approach of careful footsteps. James appeared at the edge of the clearing, freezing at the sight of his daughter sitting calmly beside the injured bear, 2 cubs now sleeping in her lap. Behind him, a woman carrying a medical kit and wearing the uniform of the State Wildlife Service gasped softly. "Emma," James said carefully, his voice tight with a mixture of relief and fear. "Don't move." Emma smiled up at him. "It's okay, Dad. She remembers me." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The wildlife veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Chen, sedated the bear to properly treat her wound, while rangers secured the area and took the 3 poachers, subdued by Connor and the search team, into custody. The cubs were temporarily removed for examination, but kept nearby so they could be reunited with their mother once she awoke. As morning fully dawned over the forest, Lily arrived, having stayed behind initially in case Emma returned home. Her tearful reunion with her daughter was followed by gentle but firm admonishments about the dangers of wandering into the forest alone at night. "I had to help her," Emma insisted, watching Dr. Chen work on the sedated bear. "I knew she was hurt. I saw it in my dream." James and Lily exchanged looks, both recalling similar statements Emma had made over the years. Dreams about her bear that seemed too detailed, too consistent to be mere childhood imagination. Dr. Chen approached them as she finished bandaging the bear's wound. "She'll recover," the veterinarian assured them. "The bullet missed any vital organs and the bleeding has stopped. She's remarkably healthy otherwise." "What will happen to her now?" Lily asked, her arms still tight around Emma's shoulders. "Normally, we'd relocate a bear that's had this much human contact," Dr. Chen explained. "But given the circumstances and her history," she glanced down at Emma with a slight smile. "Hayes has suggested we establish a wildlife sanctuary in this section of the forest instead. No hunting, limited human access, but protected status for her and her cubs. The Taylor Bear Sanctuary," Connor suggested, from where he stood reviewing the remarkable photographs he'd captured of Emma with the bear and cubs. "It would be a fitting legacy." As they discussed the details, Emma slipped away from her mother's grasp and approached the sleeping bear. Dr. Chen had assured them the sedation would last for several more hours, making it safe for the humans to remain nearby while preparations were made to monitor the bear's recovery. Emma placed her small hand on the bear's massive paw, feeling the rough pads and sharp claws that had once guided her gently across treacherous ice. "Thank you," she whispered. "We'll keep you safe now." Whether it was coincidence or something more mysterious, the bear's paw twitched slightly beneath Emma's touch, as if responding to the promise. In the weeks that followed, the story of Emma's nighttime journey to save her bear spread even more widely than the original rescue tale. The poachers faced federal charges for targeting an endangered species, with additional penalties for operating in a protected area. Their capture led authorities to a larger trafficking network, resulting in multiple arrests and the rescue of numerous animals destined for black market sales. The Taylor Bear Sanctuary became a reality, with funding pouring in from around the world. A small observation station was established at a respectful distance from the bear's usual territory, allowing researchers like Dr. Chen to study the unique bond between the child and the animal without disturbing their natural interactions. For as Emma grew, so too did her connection to the forest and its inhabitants. Under the careful guidance of her father and Ranger Hayes, she developed an uncanny ability to interpret animal behavior and predict wildlife movements. By the time she was 10, visiting scientists were consulting her observations in their research papers, albeit anonymously due to her age. The dreams continued as well. Vivid impressions of moving through the forest on 4 legs, of catching fish in the lake with powerful claws, of watching over small cubs as they grew and eventually left to establish their own territories. Emma no longer questioned these visions or tried to explain them to others. They were simply part of who she was, a gift from a moment on the ice when 2 worlds had briefly merged. On Emma's 12th birthday, the Taylor family held a small celebration at the observation station in the sanctuary. As dusk fell and cake was served, a movement at the forest's edge caught Emma's attention. The mother bear, older now, a streak of gray in her fur where the bullet had once torn through, emerged briefly into the clearing, 2 new cubs romping at her heels. The gathered guests fell silent, cameras raising instinctively to capture the rare appearance. But Emma simply smiled and raised her hand in greeting. receiving in return a long, knowing look from the creature who had changed her life. No one could explain the bond between them, whether it was gratitude, spiritual connection, or something science had yet to name. But as twilight settled over Lake Evergreen and the mother bear led her cubs back into the protection of the forest, one thing was certain. Sometimes the most profound miracles require no explanation at all, only acceptance of the mystery that connects all living things in ways beyond human understanding. The story of the mother bear and the child she rescued became more than a viral sensation or a conservationist rallying cry. It became a modern-day fable about unlikely heroes, about the wisdom of listening to dreams, and about the extraordinary compassion that can exist between species when we recognize the shared heartbeat of all creation. And for Emma Taylor, growing up under the watchful gaze of her bear, it became the foundation of a life dedicated to protecting the delicate balance between the human and natural worlds, a mission that began with a baby's innocent steps onto thin ice and a mother bear's inexplicable choice to guide her safely home. 15 years later, Emma stood at the edge of the same lake, now a respected wildlife biologist with her doctoral research focused on interspecies communication and empathy. The Taylor Bear Sanctuary had expanded to cover nearly 50 square miles of protected forest, becoming a model for conservation efforts worldwide. Emma's childhood connection to the mother bear had inspired her life's work, leading to groundbreaking studies that challenged conventional understanding of animal cognition and emotion. The early morning mist rose from the lake's surface, creating ghostly patterns that reminded her of that winter day so long ago. Emma inhaled deeply, savoring the familiar scents of pine and wild blueberry that defined her childhood home. She had returned for a bittersweet purpose. Rangers had reported that the mother bear, now elderly by bear standards, had been showing signs of declining health. "I thought I might find you here," said a familiar voice behind her. Emma turned to see Connor Adams, his hair now streaked with silver, camera still hanging from his neck after all these years. Though his wildlife photography had taken him around the world, he always returned to Lake Evergreen to document the ongoing story of the bear who had captured his heart as much as his lens. "Is it time?" Emma asked simply. Connor nodded, his eyes gentle with understanding. "Hayes called this morning. She hasn't left the den for 3 days. The cubs from her last litter, they're nearly grown now, have been bringing her food." Emma nodded, fighting back tears. Though she had studied animal behavior for years, the devotion of the aging bear's offspring still moved her deeply. "I'd like to see her, to say goodbye." Together they hiked the familiar trail into the forest, following paths Emma could have navigated blindfolded. The observation station stood empty. Ranger Hayes, now the head of the sanctuary's research division, had ensured privacy for what they all understood might be a final encounter. As they approached the clearing where the bear had made her den beneath the hollow of an ancient oak, Emma felt the familiar pull in her chest, that inexplicable connection that had guided her through the forest as a child. "I'll wait here," Connor said softly, hanging back at the edge of the clearing. Emma continued alone, her footsteps silent on the carpet of fallen leaves. The entrance to the den was visible now, a dark opening beneath gnarled roots. Near the entrance, 2 young bears, the mother's last cubs, now almost fully grown, watched her approach without alarm. They had been born into a world where Emma's scent was as familiar as the forest itself. She knelt a respectful distance from the den, waiting. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by bird song and the gentle rustle of leaves overhead. Then, with painful slowness, the mother bear emerged into the dappled sunlight. Her once powerful frame had grown thin, her movements stiff with age and the old bullet wound that had never fully healed. Gray dominated her muzzle now, and her eyes had clouded slightly with cataracts. But as those eyes found Emma, there was a flash of recognition that transcended species and time. "Hello, old friend," Emma whispered, tears flowing freely now. The bear shuffled forward, each step an evident effort. When she reached Emma, she lowered her massive head until they were eye to eye, her breath warm against Emma's face. It was a gesture she had performed countless times over the years, their ritual of greeting that researchers had documented but never fully explained. Behind them, Connor's camera clicked softly, capturing the moment when Emma reached out to touch the gray-flecked fur where the bullet had once torn through, now a badge of their shared history. "I understand now," Emma said quietly, as if the bear could comprehend her words. Perhaps, in some way beyond human understanding, she could. "Why you saved me that day on the ice, why our paths crossed." The bear rumbled deep in her chest, a sound between a purr and a growl that Emma had heard in her dreams since childhood. "Every life matters," Emma continued, her voice breaking. "Every connection. You taught me that before I could even speak. Everything I've done, all the animals I've helped protect, it began with you." From her pocket, Emma withdrew a small jar of honey, a tribute she had brought on every visit since she was old enough to make the journey alone. She opened it and placed it on the ground between them, a gift between equals. With deliberate gentleness, the bear extended her tongue to taste the offering, then raised her eyes once more to Emma's. In that gaze, Emma saw not just the animal who had saved her life, but a fellow mother, a protector, a being who had made choices born of compassion that science still struggled to explain. For nearly an hour they remained together in the clearing, sometimes touching, sometimes simply existing in each other's presence. The bear's offspring watched from a respectful distance, as did Connor, his camera eventually lowered out of reverence for the private communion he witnessed. The sun had reached its zenith when the mother bear finally turned, with evident effort, and began making her way back to her den. At the entrance, she paused and looked back at Emma one last time, as if memorizing her face. Emma understood. "Goodbye," she whispered, "and thank you for everything." The bear disappeared into the darkness of her den, her children following after a moment's hesitation. Connor approached quietly, placing a comforting hand on Emma's shoulder. "That was beautiful," he said simply. Emma wiped her tears, finding strength in the certainty of what she had experienced. "She waited for me," she said. "She knew I needed to say goodbye." 3 days later, rangers found the mother bear's body inside her den, her offspring having moved to a new location, as is natural when a parent passes. The necropsy revealed what they had suspected. Age, the old injury, and natural causes had finally claimed the remarkable animal who had defied the boundaries between wild and tame, between instinct and choice. The news spread quickly, touching hearts around the world who had followed the bear's story. Tributes poured in from conservationists, scientists, and ordinary people who had been moved by the tale of unexpected heroism on a frozen lake 2 decades earlier. At Emma's request, the bear was buried in a private ceremony at the heart of the sanctuary, beneath the ancient oak that had sheltered her final days. A simple stone marker bore no name, for she had never been given one, remaining wild despite her connection to humans, but carried a single engraved image, a bear and a child, connected by an unbroken line. The night after the burial, Emma dreamed more vividly than she had since childhood. She moved through the forest on 4 paws, feeling the earth beneath her, smelling the rich complexity of life in every breath. She climbed hills and waded through streams, tasting berries and feeling the joy of strength flowing through powerful muscles. Above all, she felt freedom, the wild, untamable essence of a creature bound by neither human expectations nor limitations. She woke at dawn with tears on her face, but peace in her heart, understanding at last the final gift her bear had given her, not just life on that frozen day long ago, but a glimpse into another way of being, another form of wisdom that would guide her work protecting the delicate web of life that connected all creatures. 1 month later, as summer bloomed across Lake Evergreen, Emma stood with her parents, Connor and Ranger Hayes, at the dedication of a new education center at the entrance to the sanctuary. Hundreds had gathered for the occasion, drawn by the story that continued to touch hearts across generations. As Emma approached the podium to give her address, a commotion at the forest's edge drew everyone's attention. Gasps rippled through the crowd as 2 young bears emerged briefly into view, the offspring of the mother bear, now making their own way in the world but still connected to this place of protection. They paused for just a moment, as if observing the ceremony before melting back into the trees. Emma smiled through her tears, recognizing the perfect symmetry of the moment. When she spoke, her voice carried across the hushed gathering with quiet certainty. 20 years ago, on a winter day not far from where we stand, an extraordinary choice was made. A wild creature chose compassion over instinct, connection over separation. In saving my life, that mother bear changed not just my fate, but the fate of this forest and countless animals who now find sanctuary here. She gestured toward where the bears had appeared. Her legacy continues, not just in her offspring who still roam these protected woods, but in every child who learns about her story and begins to see animals not as creatures separate from us, but as fellow travelers on this fragile planet, beings capable of depth, intelligence, and yes, even compassion that we are only beginning to understand. Emma paused, her hand resting over her heart. Science has tried to explain what happened that day on the ice. Some suggest the bear mistook me for a cub, that her actions were purely instinctual. Others propose more complex theories about cross-species empathy or mutual aid behaviors. She smiled, looking out at the lake glimmering in the distance. But perhaps the most important lesson of all is that some mysteries aren't meant to be fully explained. They're meant to be honored by how we live in response to them. The Taylor Bear Sanctuary exists because sometimes the most profound truths come not from what we can prove, but from what we can only witness with awe and gratitude. As the crowd rose in applause, Emma felt a familiar sensation, the gentle pressure that had guided her through forest and dream alike, a presence that defied death and separation. Though the mother bear was gone, the connection remained, woven into the fabric of Emma's being and into the protected wilderness that would stand as a living memorial for generations to come. And somewhere in the depths of the forest, where sunlight filtered through ancient trees and new life took root in rich soil, the spirit of an extraordinary bear lived on, in her offspring, in the sanctuary that bore her legacy, and in the heart of the child she had saved, who had grown to ensure that acts of cross-species compassion would never be forgotten. For in that single moment on the ice, when a mother bear saw a baby in danger and chose to help rather than harm, a truth older than language had been revealed. That the boundaries we perceive between species, between wild and tame, between instinct and choice, are perhaps more permeable than we dare imagine, and that in that permeability lies our greatest hope for healing our relationship with the natural world. As twilight fell over Lake Evergreen, painting the water in shades of gold and rose, Emma Taylor stood alone at the lake's edge, at the exact spot where her life's journey had begun. She closed her eyes, feeling the gentle breeze against her face, and whispered words meant not for human ears but for something larger, the intricate web of life itself, where a bear and a human child had found, against all odds, common ground. "Thank you," she said simply. "I will never forget." And the wind carried her words into the heart of the forest, where new cubs tumbled in play beneath watchful eyes, where life continued in endless cycles of wonder, and where the line between human and animal blurred just enough to remind us all that compassion knows no boundaries, not even those between species.